Hi, my name is Catriona Starpins and I love all things sparkle, especially glass beads. Today we are here to make this cute little bumblebee, affectionately called Bumble. He's a three-dimensional little cartoon bee, and he's been especially made for International Beading Week 2025. So you can get your pattern from internationalbeadingweek.com. Okay, let's take a closer look at the little bumblebees. So far I've got two already made to pattern test, and today we're going to be making a International Beading Week rainbow version of this bumblebee. So this one here is the blue banded bee version. In Australia we have a blue banded bumblebee. He has little blue stripes on his back, and they are actually an endangered species here in Australia. So that's why I've made this little blue one. You can see they've got a little bit of dimension. The wings are popping out from the rest of it, so we're going to do some layering in our work. And I've made these into little brooches, but you can make them into whatever you like. So don't be afraid to make a hair clip or a pendant, or even you could make it into a cute statement ring as well, depending on the findings you use at the end. And this is the original Bumble, and he's in traditional Bumble colours, and you can see I've done quite a cartoon bee. I wanted this to be a bit of fun. It's pretty hard to make realistic in beadwork, as you can imagine. I wanted to make it definitely look like a bee, but also to be cute as well. So that's why I've gone with this. And I don't know if you can see there on the camera, but he's actually got a bit of dimension in his little bumps. The little black areas are raised up from the rest to make him sort of pop out a bit and have some dimension. So this will be fun to make. Let's get started on the rainbow version. So I have used a piece of t-shirt printing paper. This is inkjet heat transfer paper, and I purchased this from Kmart here in Australia. Any office supplies place will probably have it, and it's just for transferring your images onto fabric. So I've printed out quite a few copies of the template here, and we're now going to transfer this onto our foundation. I'm just going to trim a couple of these out. I use 2 of these templates per bumblebee. So we'll start with 2 of those, and I'm just roughly trimming them out like this. There we go. This board I'm working on is very similar to like an ironing board. It's just portable and I can put it on my desk. It's just so that the heat doesn't affect my desk, and it's got a board, and then it's got some plush coating, so it's a little bit softer, and then a piece of cotton fabric over the top because cotton can stand high heat. So I have prepared some stiffened felt here, and this is perfect for this project because it's a little bit thicker than most foundations. Some people call it stiffened felt or Palin. Lacy stiff stuff's okay too, just won't end up with as puffy a bee in the finish. So I've cut out just slightly bigger than my piece of heat transfer, and I'm preparing that by doing face down. If you do use this paper for something that's got writing or something that you don't want to be a mirror finish, you need to make sure you flip the image before you print it out, or it will end up backwards. The tool I'm using to heat set is the Cricut Easy Press Mini, and it's a fantastic little tool for doing small things like I do. You can use an iron or any other heat tool that has a flat surface on here, preferably with no steam. You want to turn the steam off on your iron if you are using an iron. Just going to turn it on here, and I'm going to turn it to the highest setting. Wait for that to warm up and we'll be back. So I know that this is heated up now because it's green on here, and I'm going to cover my work just to protect it with a little sheet of Teflon coated fabric, and this just stops anything from sticking to my heat press. and I'm just going to apply a little bit of pressure and warm up that heat transfer paper. This is making the image stick to the felt, and it can take a few minutes just to warm it up enough. You want to make sure that it's definitely adhered onto the foundation. If you rush this process, it's really annoying if you peel it off and it's only half stuck and it tears through the image that you're transferring. So just take the time to make sure it has warmed up enough. So I can check to see if that has, it's definitely adhered. I'm going to probably make sure it's about at least 30 seconds on each piece. And to turn this off, you simply hold down the button and it turns off. Okay, I have left these to cool down completely. Don't be tempted to peel this while it is hot because you'll risk the image ripping or tearing. And I'm just going to bend the felt just slightly to get that image started, and you can see that that is attached beautifully and peels off perfectly. So we'll do that to the other one, just bending the felt just a little bit to get that image started, and the perfect peel. Very satisfying. We are now ready to bead. I'm going to be using some crystal fireline today, and I'm treating myself to a new needle. It's very nice. I'm using the John James straw needles. I buy them in a 25 pack. I like these because they're quite a short needle, which is good for my small hands, and they have a nice eye for threading with the fireline. And I'm using crystal just because I have a lot of it, need to use it up. And I'm going to be using some crystal AB beads for the wings. So the first part of this project, I'm going to use all crystal fireline. The first part of this project is outlining the wings here, and I'm going to be outlining each of them with the pewter size 15 seed beads. So we're just going to be using a back stitch for this, and I want the wings to be quite strong to hold the beads within the center. I want this perimeter of beads to hold steadfast. So I'm actually going to be doing a 2 bead back stitch but coming back through 3. So I pick up 2 size 15s, pick up 2 size 15s, pass down through the foundation, come back up through the last 3. Like so. And we repeat that, picking up 2, and passing back through 3, I'm going to do that all the way around this wing. There we go. Perimeter of the second wing is done. Now we're going to fill in both wings with crystal AB, silver lined crystal AB beads. Just bringing my needle back over to where I need to be. And I'll get the beads out we're going to use. So in the corner of the wing, I'm just adding a single bead, and then as the wing starts to have a little bit more space, I can add a few more beads across. And sometimes I put the beads onto my needle and just sort of measure them like this to see what fits in the area, and I think 3 beads for the next one. When I'm filling in with my bead embroidery and I'm colouring in like this, I tend to prefer to couch the beads into position than do a back stitch. Do whichever you prefer. So you can see the next row here, I think 5 beads will fit quite nicely. Okay, we've filled in one of the wings. Now we can fill in the smaller of them. I find them easier to work from the smaller section to the larger section. So on the back of my work, I'll just bring my needle back down to the narrower section of the wing and start filling in the same as I did with the other one. There we go. Now that we've done one wing, we need to do the same for the wing on the other side. Okay, I have finished both wings, knot off my thread, and then we're going to trim these out. To cut these out, I use these little scissors with a short blade. These are the Berkeley Fireline Power Pro scissors, and they're super handy for cutting out a small intricate bead embroidery. So I'm just trimming around the wings, and you can see I tend to move the beadwork around. I'm not moving the scissors too much. I'm keeping them in a nice ergonomical position. And you can trim to make it easier to get around, and then you can come back and cut more detailed. Just make sure that you're not cutting under the work like this and risking snipping your stitches on the foundation. I use the edge of the blade here up against the beads themselves to work out what sort of distance to cut. And something like this where I need to cut into there, I use the scissors from each side of that. Trim a little bit like that until you've got your wings cut out. To do this, I'm using a Sharpie fine point marker, and all I do is just run that gently along the edges, being careful not to get any texture on my beads. And it just creates a nice shadow on the edge there and stands out much less than the white foundation. To make it so we have a nice finish on the back of our little wings here, we're going to use a little piece of ultra suede, and I've got a small scrap here that I can use. On your ultra suede there is a right and a wrong side. One is more smooth and the other has a bit more plush velvety finish. The velvety finish is the side you want showing when you've finished. So we're going to glue this little wing using some E6000 glue, and you can see I turn the glue up like this to try and keep the last bit in the tube nice and fresh. And we're going to glue this little wing onto the ultra suede, using the top of the glue tube itself to spread that glue nice and thin, and we'll stick that onto the wrong side so that when we're finished the right side will be showing. Once your wing has had a little moment to dry on that ultra suede, you can then cut it out, and you want it to end up the exact same size as what your felt is. So again, I rest my scissors up against that felt and carefully cut it out. By sticking it down first and then trimming, you know that your piece of ultra suede will end up the same size as your felt foundation. And you get a much nicer finish when it's the same size. It makes it much nicer to be able to get a good straight edge on your work and have the beads sit nicely if the two pieces match perfectly. So there we go. Now I'm ready to do my edge stitch. I've switched over to a smoke fire line. I'm going to use smoke for the rest of this project, and I'm going to hide my knot in between the beads here on the front of the work and bring my needle out just near the edge there. Hopefully you can see it's just in from the edge. I'm going to pick up 2 of my pewter size 15 seed beads and pull them up close to the work, and then I'm going to come back in the opposite direction through that second bead of the 2, and this is going to pull them up against the edge of the work here like that. For each of the remaining brick stitches around, I'm only going to be picking up 1 bead at a time, and I'm coming from the front of the work through the back and then back through that bead, and each time I pull that up against the edge of the beadwork, and as I pull, it pulls the file line down into the ultra suede and the stitches disappear. As I come to the corner, I simply just keep traveling along. There's no fancy stitch there or anything. Just picking up a bead, stitching through the foundation, and then coming back through the bead to get it to sit side on to the edge of the wing. I'm going to continue this until I get right the way around the wing. When you get to a part like this where there's a corner, simply add beads as far as you can into that corner, and then your next bead after that will need to just be around the corner on the edge. And if you're not sure where it needs to go, you can put the bead onto your needle and line it up like this and see that my next, needle point needs to be just in line with that there. and simply carry on around the corner just like that. I'm just coming up to the edge here where I've got probably the space for one more bead. So this last bead, add that in that little gap. And then I need to go through this bead, which was the first bead we added. And we continue the same thread path by going through the foundation and back up into the bead. And that's what makes it stay up nice and close on the edge there. Pull that up nice and tight, and that looks really nice. So now I can do a little knot. I usually do a little half hitch knot and pull it down into the bead, and then I use my thread burner to just melt a little knot so that that can't pull out, and press that down with my finger. Make sure that's nice and close to the bead there, like that. And there we go. We now have our 2 wings edged and ready to go. Now we're ready to start working on the Bumblebee body. Okay, so I have my second template, and what I want to do is prepare it for, we want to make these little wings here prop up a little bit. And so I'm going to draw a line between the head here and the body, just slightly rounded, but just continue that B shape, like that. And I'm also going to just colour this in black, because that indicates to me where my wing is going to attach. Like this. So I'll do that on both sides. I'm turning it around because I tend to draw curves better from this side of my hand than if I had have drawn it this way. I find it harder to draw a curve that way than if the curve is on the outside of my hand. So just turn it around and follow between the head and the body like that. And then again, just colouring that in. This is just a fine tip permanent marker that I'm using. The Sharpie would do the job as well. Just like that. Now, using the matte black size 15 seed beads, I'm going to outline this outer perimeter around the bumblebee. I'm going to use the same backstitch method that I did for the wings, picking up 2 beads to begin with, coming back through them. Then I'm going to pick up 2 beads, might be hard to see them on the camera because they're matte black, and I'm going to come back through 3. And you see that? It's probably very tricky to see that there are 4 seed beads there now. I'm going to continue to do this perimeter all the way around, and we'll come back once I finish that lap. There we go, I've done my perimeter around the outside. Now we need to find our 2mm pieces of leather. I have this leather that I've got, it's just like a thin leather cord, and it's black in colour. And what I'm going to do is just cut 3 pieces. One piece is going to go on this black band just here, and I'll get my scissors and cut a little piece so that it will fit nicely just in here, like that. And this is what we're going to bead over to give that added little dimension that you can see on these black pieces here. I'll cut one piece that's roughly the length of the middle stripe here from where the black starts on the edges there. It'll fit in this little posi there, like so. And then I need one more piece to fit in this last top bit. So it doesn't need to be too long, just a little piece, roughly that long. And it will fit in this little spot up here like that. What I'm going to do now is just stitch them into position. I'll bring my thread just up to where we're stitching. And hold that into position there, and then I'm just going to stitch over the top of that leather. Just to hold that in position. And I'm doing fairly big stitches, they're about 4 or 5 mils apart. And I'm coming up right next to the leather and passing down right next to the leather. And that just means it's got nowhere to move. It can only just stay in position like that. I'll just come up. And these are just to hold them into position. This one looks a little bit long. Hold it roughly into position. We're going to be coming back and beading over it, so there's no need to fuss over doing too many stitches over it. The needle just came unthreaded. One more just because we can. Why not? And then I'll bring my needle down here where this last one is. And stitch this one into position too. And I'm trying to keep them roughly in the middle of these two are roughly in the middle of that black stripe. This one's just towards the bottom of that black stripe. Now, if like mine, you've got little sections there where the leather is showing in the brown, you can just get your marker or pen and just colour that in. And it just helps that disappear. This probably would be easier with my Sharpie because it's got a bigger tip, so it would colour it in quicker. There we go. Job done. We have our little pieces of leather attached and we're ready to bead over them. The beads that I'm using to bead over the black leather are these Jet Azura size 15 seed beads, and you can see they have a little bit of a glint of blue on them, and it's a really nice effect. Every now and then if you move the little bee, you get a little glint of blue. If you're watching this black bit here, you can see little highlights of blue just pop up. I just thought it was a nice touch, especially with these blue banded bees, to just have that glint of blue showing. So that's why I'm using these. When beading over the leather, it takes about 5 of the size 15 seed beads fit nicely over it, and I'm coming up on this side, so I'm going to go down next to the leather on the other side, and the beads just sit like a little arch over the top of the leather, if you can see that. And I'm just going to do that all the way along. Next to that one, do another group of 5, 3, 4,
5 seed beads. Two, three, 4, 5. And it's pretty tricky to film black on black. Okay, at the ends, if you've got a little bit of leather showing there, 2 seed beads just at the end there fits quite nicely to cover up that little piece of leather. And you can do that on both sides. I'll just weave my way back across and do it to the other side too. And my thread's getting very short, so I probably should start a new piece of thread now as well. There we go. Coming on to the back of my work. I'm going to do a little half hitch around a thread that's already there. And then bring the thread through again. And I like to do knots with my thread burner. Like that. And that just means that the thread won't be able to pull back through for the beads to become undone. So we have one little lumpy stripe on our bee. Now, before we do this middle and top one, it's going to actually be easier for us to attach our little wings in there, I think. And I do this simply by stitching those into position, and the beads that we put along here just makes them sit up a little bit from the rest of the work. We don't want them to sit down flat because it gives them a little bit more dimension. When sewing through your wings and anchoring them into position, you want to make sure that your stitches are landing inside the edge of the bee's body, because we're going to be trimming around this later and you don't want to cut any stitches off. So just make sure when you're attaching it, you're keeping to within this triangle here on the bee. Sometimes the pliers really help pulling the stitches through. I definitely love having my thimble to be able to push the needle up into the beadwork. Those beads inside here are helping the wing to just push up a little bit. So that's great. I would consider that well enough attached, and we'll head over to do the wing on the opposite side of the body now. Attach that in the same way, clamping it in position. And carefully stitching through all of these layers. Not overly easy on the hands, this layering part, but I think it adds a bit of dimension and texture to the project, so it makes the fussing about stitching through thick layers worth it in the end. Okay, pretty happy with how that looks. Now I'm going to add my jet azuro beads over this center part. I'll tie a little knot before I head over there, just a little half hitch knot just to secure that wing attachment nice and strong. And then we come over here, and just like we did before, 5 beads works well over this 2mm piece of leather when you're using 15s. Picking up 5, going over the top of the leather and pulling them down into position. 2, 3, 4, 5 beads. There we go. How cutesy looking. It's coming along really well. Let's head up to the top section now. And do the same as what we've done over the other pieces of leather. That middle one there where it goes right up higher on the head section, I've used 6 beads then to fill that gap. And that worked quite well. I added the 5 and it didn't look quite right, so I've come back and added 6. And that looks quite good now. Now you can see those sections are all beaded. Now we're going to colour in this little section in here. So the first of the bees, I used 3 different colours of gold beads. I used a matte gold, a matte silver lined gold and a silver lined gold. And you can see how it sort of gives a little bit of a shaded effect having those 3 different colours. And here I've done 2 silver line gold, a matte silver line gold and a matte gold. And I've just coloured in those little sections on the bee here with those gold beads. For the second one I made, I used 2 different shades of blue. I used a light salon style blue and then a silver line blue, and then I kept with the matte gold just to keep it tied in with a bee sort of look, keep the yellow in there a little bit. They did have a little bit of yellow tone on those blue banded native bees, so I wanted to make sure I had a little bit of yellow on this bee as well. For this particular one, I'm going to do a rainbow International Beading Week logo style one. So I've picked out 9 rainbow colours. Let's take a look at them now. So these are the rainbow colours I picked out. I picked 9 colours because I think 3 to 4 beads sort of fits in that gap on the little bee quite nicely. So 9 beads is a good amount to have. I've got a opaque carnation, an opaque red, an opaque orange, opaque yellow, opaque green. This is like a transparent matte blue AB. It's one of my favourite lighter blues to use. This is a also transparent sort of colour matte cobalt AB. A Duracoat opaque anemone, nice dark purple, and then a lighter purple, the opaque columbine. So what I'm going to do is just lay a little tiny bit of each one of those onto my bead mat so we can get rainbowing our bee. Let's start at the top. I'm going to just come up into that area, and we've got pink, red, orange. Just going to pick up that rainbow series there and pull that into that little gap. Now to get these straightened up a bit, I think I need one more pink bead on its own. Pull that into that little gap. Now we can go back to adding the 3, pink, red, orange. And there's only going to be the tiniest little highlight of each colour there because we are working on a very small project. I think it just will be just enough to add a subtle rainbow to our little bumble. And obviously there's no rainbow bees. It's just me taking a play on International Beading Week. Their logo has 12 different rainbow colours, and they designed it to go along with the rainbow project. A lot of people do a rainbow project every year and they bead one different element for that rainbow project each month of the year to then combine it into one piece at the end of the year. And if you follow along on International Beading Week on Facebook, a lot of people are making rainbow projects. So you can see there I've got my pink, red, orange filled in. Super cute. Alright, let's move on to yellow, green, blue. So we've got yellow, green, light blue. And I think we can fit another little light blue down there in that little gap. Just there. And I'm just working my way across, filling that in. I love colouring in with size 15 seed beads. I think it's a lot of fun. Coming along nicely. Buzz, 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 buzz. Now we've got dark blue, dark purple, light purple. Gonna do 2 of the blue where it gets a bit wider and I can fit 4 beads like that. I'll just come back over here and fill in this little gap. I think it'll fit. Two beads and then 1 bead. Make my way back over here and do another one of the 4 bead rows, and then I think we'll be back down to 3 beads. There we go. And just at the bottom here where the little bee stinger is, I'm going to add a group of 2 of the Jet Azuro seed beads at the bottom there. And just couch over the middle. And then I'm going to come up and sort of add a picot in the middle of those, exiting one of them. Pick up another bead in the same colour and go through the other, and this will create a little triangle of the Azuro beads at the bottom there, and that will just be the little stinger on the bottom. Okay, now we've finished the beading on this layer, we need to cut it out, and we're going to be cutting around this perimeter of the body. Just be careful not to cut any beads, and it's sort of tricky to get in there behind the wings, but you just gently trim around it. Hold the wings back so you can get your scissors in, and being careful not to cut any of those threads. Like that. I'm now going to use my Sharpie and just colour in these edges black like we did with the wings. With my work, I find that it gets a little bit of cupping here due to me stitching so tightly with file line and adding dimension to my work. And I'm going to fill that in with a nice little piece of felt to fill that gap. So I'm going to use one of these itty bitty small brooch findings. And they have a little lock for the pin, like this. And you want it to be so that gravity holds the lock down closed when you're wearing it. So this will face the bottom of your work. So when you open it to undo the brooch pin, the lock is facing the top of the pin. And when you want to wear it and make it locked in position, it's facing the bottom of the pin like that. So just make sure when you're stitching your pin on, you have it orientated correctly. And we're just going to stitch the pin onto this little piece of felt here. Try and pinch it with my thumb. You can see I've anchored it here and here. Now I'll go to the other side of the hole and anchor it in the same two positions on the other side of the brooch pin, like this. And then I'm also going to put a few stitches at each end of the brooch pin. This will just really secure it and stop it from moving around. And I'm going to go through those sections a couple of times just to make sure it's nice and secure and going to have nowhere that it can move. And come up the other end of the brooch pin and do exactly the same. Now we need to sew this into position on our little bee, and again I'm going to go through the whole bee here, right through all the layers to make it nice and strong. And it doesn't matter what your stitches look like on the back because no one's ever going to see them. You're better off worrying about, are your stitches strong and secure than are they pretty? Because no one's going to know what's going on inside once we're finished. Do one over the top of the brooch finding just to make that super strong. And you'll see I'm checking each layer to just make sure that where my needle's coming out the front, I'm not looping in a silly spot over the top of the beads or anything. and making sure that it looks good from the front and that these stitches are being hidden down in between the beads. And then I'm going to tie a couple of half hitches just here. That's nice and strong and secure before we just burn that off with a thread burner. Now, if I was doing a larger piece of beadwork where you were going to see more of the stitches and divots showing through the ultra suede, I would use a little piece of template plastic on the back here to cover any stitch markings, but I don't think that's necessary on this occasion. So what I'm going to do now is get another little piece of ultra suede and we're going to glue that into position. So I've got my little scrap of ultra suede that's going to be big enough for the little body, and I want to make sure that I've got a position for the brooch finding to fit through marked on. So you can see I've just used my white gel pen to just mark where each end of the pin needs to come through this ultra suede, and then I can cut those with my scissors to just make a little hole. You don't need much of a hole, it doesn't need to be very big because it stretches over the top of the brooch pin really well with just a tiny hole there. It's much better if you cut a small hole and then find it doesn't fit and then make it slightly bigger than if you cut too big a hole and then you can't make it smaller. Okay, so I need to open this brooch pin and I need to pass the pin through the hole like this and stretch that suede over that. See how it just fit over there nicely? Just pops on, and do the same with the other side. Its little locking mechanism is a bit bigger. Alright, so we've popped that on like that. Okay, so I'm folding that back. I'm just going to put a little bit of E6000 glue there. Doesn't need to go right to the edge because we're going to bring our needle through there multiple times when we do the edge stitching. So the less glue you have right on the very edge, the better really. But as close to the edge as you can without getting it everywhere. Okay, I've left that to dry for a little bit, so now I'm just going to use my scissors to very gently follow the line as before up against the body, behind the wings there. And I can come back in each direction if I need to. Come to this side, just gently trim like so. Be careful I don't cut into the little stinger on the end there. And there we go. We are trimmed around and ready to do some edge stitching. On the other two bumblebees, I did do the edge stitching for the back with the black, but as you can see it's really hard to see it. So I might do the edge stitching on this one with the pewter just so that you can see what I'm doing. The best way you can support my channel is to like this video and subscribe. That way you'll get more creative content and more people will find me on YouTube, and that will make me happy. Alright, so pick a spot on your edge. I've got a new knot ready to go and I'm going to hide that knot in the front of my work there between the beads. Pull the thread down and no one will know. And as we did earlier with the edging of the wings, we want to start with 2 beads for the first stitch only. So I've picked up 2 beads, I've got my little bit of edging there, and I'm working with the front side of the work facing away from me so that I can see just how the back is looking. I like to have a really good finish on the back as well. And heading back through that seed bead and pull them up close to the work. And now I continue on with 1 seed bead at a time. Pull it up to the edge, head back through the bead in the opposite direction. Pull that up to the edge, heading back through the bead in the opposite direction. And you can see with the file line and the ultra suede combo, the stitches are just disappearing completely into that ultra suede, and you get a really beautiful finish of just seed beads. You can't see any stitches in it at all. It's a really lovely finish. I just think it looks crisp and finished really to a high standard. When you can't see those stitches, they just look really nice. Heading around the corner. Oops, nearly got a tangle then. And you can see I don't do anything fancy when I go around the corner. I just keep going along the edge. Pull the wing back if you need to get the needle in. Like that. And I'm nearly past that tricky part now where it's really hard to get the needle in. Just putting the last bead in the edge here. And then go through the bead that we added first. Go through some foundation and ultra suede bead. And then just use your finger to straighten out those beads on the edge there. I'm going to do a little half hitch knot again. Pull that down into inside the bead there, and then melt off that thread. Now the only thing we don't have is the little antennae at the top there. So let's bring our thread coming out up here and we can add those in. Alright, so I've just started a new thread and I've hidden the knot in here, the front between the beads there, and now I'm going to bring my thread up towards the front. And we're going to use some of the Jet Azuro seed beads. Just pop some of them onto my bead mat, along with a 3mm round. So I have some 3mm round beads here, and you just need 2 of those, one for each of his little antennae. And I've done a series of 4 seed beads, a 3mm round, and then 1 seed bead on the top. So we pick up 4 of our size 15s, 1 3mm round and 1 size 15, and we pull those down into position, and just make sure that you're happy with where it's going to be coming out before you go too far along. And then skip this bead that's on the end and go through all the other beads again. And just pulling that up tight, and I'm going to go right through to the opposite side here and just pull that up tight, and you can see it's just sitting nice and perky out the top there. Now I'm just going to take a couple of small stitches across to make my way to the other side, and the stitches are so small you don't see them on the back here on the foundation. They tend to just disappear, so don't worry about that too much. If you make too big a stitch, they will show though, so just keep that in mind. Alright, so I think the other one will look good coming out of here, or maybe slightly further across. Let's just take a little stitch around the edge there. Yes, I think that will be a good spot for the second one to come out. So I pick up that series again. I need 4 size 15s, 1 3mm, 1 15, and pull those down. I just take a little look. Yes, I think that's going to be a good spot for that. Skip that first 15 and go back through all of the other beads again and go down to the other side. And just pulling that up. And there you go, you can see that sitting quite nicely at the top there. And what you can do is just take a little stitch and go through those again just to secure them. Make sure they're reinforced. Go through. It's tricky because I pulled it up quite tight to get through them all. Go through all the beads, skipping the 15 the second time because that's the anchor point for coming back down. And again coming through to the back. So that should be nice and strong now. I will head across to the other one, just reinforce that. I could have reinforced it while I was there, but I was just thinking just then that it would be better if it was reinforced. And head through all of those beads, through the 15, and then back down through all of those beads. Pull the needle through like that. And it's got 2 little perky little antennae. And all finished. Now I'll just bring my needle up here somewhere in the front, tie a little half hitch on a thread that's inconspicuous, thread through a bead or so, and then I'm going to melt that thread off. With my thread burner. Melted it down into a little knot, and there we go. There's our little rainbow International Beading Week Bumblebee. So these are all the little bumbles. Now they are finished. The first one, this was the first cab off the rank that I designed. Then we've got the second one, the blue banded native bee, and the third one, the International Beading Week Bumblebee. Super happy with all of those. I may even wear them all at once because they're super cute and I love them. Thanks for coming along today to make your very own Bumblebee for International Beading Week. If you too would like to make your own little Bumblebee, you can find all of the links to the patterns and supplies you would need in the details of this video below. To say thanks, I would love a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for more creative content from me. Thanks for watching and happy beading. Bye.